The security guard wouldn't stop staring at me. His arms were crossed and he stood so close I could smell his coffee breath. My manager, Derek Phillips, leaned against the door frame with that same smirk he always wore when he thought he was winning. I clutched the cardboard box tighter against my chest, feeling my personal items shift inside. 3 years of my life fit into one pathetic box. My stapler, a coffee mug, a photo frame. "Don't take it personally, Walsh," Derek said loud enough for everyone to hear. The entire office had gone silent. 20 people pretended to work while actually watching my humiliation. Someone snickered near the copy machine. My hands trembled, but I kept my face blank. This was exactly how they wanted me to leave. Broken, embarrassed, defeated. I could feel their eyes burning into my back as I walked toward the exit. The security guard followed 3 steps behind, like I might suddenly steal office supplies. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. I didn't look back, not once, but I memorized every single face in that room. Every person who laughed, every person who looked away. I would remember them all. I had to pass the break room to reach the elevator. The door was half open and I heard voices inside. "She won't last a month out there," someone said. It was Tracy from accounting. The same Tracy who used to ask me for help with spreadsheets every week. "Some people just aren't cut out for the real world," another voice added. Marcus. He'd borrowed money from me last year and never paid it back. I stopped walking for just a second. My throat felt tight and my eyes burned, but I didn't turn around. I didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I kept moving, one foot in front of the other until I reached the elevator. My reflection stared back at me from the metal doors. Messy hair, red eyes, wrinkled shirt from where I'd clutched the box too tight. The elevator dinged, the doors opened. I stepped inside and finally let myself breathe. They thought the story ended here. They thought I would disappear and never matter again. They were so incredibly wrong. My name is Megan Walsh. I'm 32 years old, white, American, and until 2 hours ago, I had a job I actually cared about. Now I had nothing, just a box of junk and an empty bank account. I sat on the bus counting the money in my wallet. $43. That had to last until I figured out what came next. Rent was due in 12 days. My phone bill was already overdue. I had maybe 2 weeks of food in my apartment if I stretched it. The woman sitting across from me smiled kindly, and I almost burst into tears right there. Instead, I looked out the window and watched the city blur past. Buildings, cars, people with jobs and lives and futures. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and made myself a promise. I would never be this powerless again. Never. Whatever it took, however long it required, I would climb out of this hole. And when I did, I wouldn't forget what happened today. Not the laughter, not the cruelty, not a single face. The firing didn't come out of nowhere. I'd seen it building for months, maybe longer. The company had started changing about a year ago when new management came in. Suddenly promotions went to people who played golf with the bosses, not people who actually worked. I watched Kevin get promoted to senior analyst, even though he spent half his day on fantasy football. Meanwhile, I'd pulled 3 all-nighters that month finishing a project that saved the company $200,000. My name was on that report. My research, my analysis, my recommendations. But when they presented it to the board, Derek's name was on the cover page. He took full credit, and everyone congratulated him. I sat in the back of that meeting, invisible. When I tried to speak up once, just once, Derek cut me off and said we should stay focused on the big picture. Translation, shut up. The other women in the office saw it too. We talked about it quietly, carefully, in bathrooms and parking garages. But none of us said anything official. We needed our jobs. We had bills to pay. So we stayed quiet and kept working, hoping things would get better. They only got worse. They fired me during the Monday morning team meeting, not in Derek's office, not in HR. In front of 14 people, Derek stood at the head of the conference table and said they were restructuring the department and making difficult decisions about team composition. His eyes landed on me. "Megan, we're going to have to let you go. Effective immediately." The room went completely silent. I felt my face go hot, then cold. My hands started shaking under the table. "You can collect your things after the meeting," he continued, like he was discussing lunch orders. "Security will escort you out." Someone coughed. Someone else shifted in their chair. Nobody looked at me. Nobody said a word in my defense. I stood up somehow, though my legs felt like water. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked out of that conference room with whatever dignity I had left. They wanted witnesses. They wanted everyone to see what happened when you didn't play their games. They wanted to make an example of me. And they did. Just not the example they intended. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. I counted every single one. I'd sold my car 3 months ago when money got tight. Back then, I thought it was temporary. A small sacrifice until things improved. Now I realized things were never going to improve at that company. Not for me. Not for anyone who actually worked instead of politicking. The bus smelled like old French fries and cleaning chemicals. A teenager sat in the back blasting music from his phone. An elderly man dozed near the front. The kind woman from earlier got off at the third stop, giving me one more gentle smile before she left. I wondered what she saw when she looked at me. Probably just another person having a bad day. She had no idea my entire life had just collapsed. When I finally reached my stop, my arms ached from holding the box. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment because the elevator was broken again. My neighbor's dog barked as I passed. Everything was exactly the same as when I'd left that morning. Except everything was completely different. I was different. And I would never be that powerless person again. The first 2 weeks were the hardest. I applied for jobs every single day. Retail, food service, office work, anything. Nobody called back. My savings disappeared faster than I expected. Groceries became too expensive, so I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I sold my television, then my microwave, then my winter coat, even though it was only September. The debt collectors started calling. I stopped answering numbers I didn't recognize. Then I stopped answering numbers I did recognize because I couldn't face my mother's worried voice asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I was so far from okay I couldn't even see it anymore. But I kept my laptop. That was the one thing I refused to sell, even when I was 3 days away from eviction. That laptop was my only connection to the possibility of something better. Late at night, I taught myself new skills. Marketing, web design, freelancing platforms. I had nothing but time and desperation. Turns out that's a powerful combination. Week 3, something clicked. I was lying in bed at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling and replaying everything that happened. Derek's smirk, Tracy's comment, the way everyone looked away. And suddenly I saw it clearly. They weren't actually smart, they weren't talented or strategic or visionary. They were just loud and confident and willing to take credit for other people's work. That's all it took at that company. Be loud enough and you could fail upward forever. But loud people miss things. They don't pay attention to details because they're too busy performing. They don't see threats coming because they assume everyone is beneath them. Derek never once asked about my work. He just slapped his name on it and moved on. He had no idea what I was actually capable of because he'd never bothered to look. None of them had. That was their first mistake. And I was going to make sure it was their last. I got up and opened my laptop, started making a plan. A real one. I stopped applying for regular jobs. Instead, I set up a profile on 3 freelancing platforms. My rates were low at first because I needed any work I could get. My first client paid me $75 to analyze their social media strategy. It took me 6 hours, but I did it perfectly. They hired me again the next week. Then they referred me to someone else. That client had a bigger budget, $200 for a marketing audit. I delivered it early with extra recommendations they hadn't asked for. They were impressed. Suddenly, I had 3 clients. Then 5. Then 8. None of them knew I was working from a tiny apartment with plastic furniture and an empty refrigerator. None of them knew I'd been fired 6 weeks ago. All they knew was that I delivered quality work on time, every time. My rates went up. Slowly at first, then faster. By month 3, I was making more than I'd made at my old job. By month 6, I'd doubled it. The best part? Nobody from my old company noticed. They'd completely forgotten I existed. Perfect. I spent the next year learning everything I could about business. Real business. Not just the work I used to do. I took online courses in contract law, financial management, mergers and acquisitions, corporate strategy. I read books written by people who'd built companies from nothing. I studied case studies of turnarounds and hostile takeovers and strategic restructuring. Not because I had a specific plan yet, just because I was done being powerless. Knowledge was power, and I was hungry for both. My consulting work kept growing. I hired 2 freelancers to help with overflow projects, then 4. Then I registered as an actual LLC. Nothing fancy, just the paperwork that made it official. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is hot and quick and burns out fast. What I felt now was cold and patient and permanent. Focus. Pure focus on building something they could never take away from me. I tracked my old company from a distance, read their press releases, monitored their financial reports, watched their leadership make the same mistakes over and over. And I waited. My income stabilized around month 18. Then it doubled by month 24. Then it tripled 6 months after that. I hired actual employees, rented office space, won contracts with major corporations. My company specialized in efficiency audits and strategic consulting. Basically, I helped businesses figure out where they were bleeding money and how to fix it. Turns out, I was really good at it. Probably because I'd spent years watching my old company waste resources on incompetent management. I knew exactly what dysfunction looked like. I moved into a better apartment, bought a car, started saving real money for the first time in my life. But I didn't buy fancy clothes or expensive jewelry or any of the status symbols people usually chase. I stayed under the radar. Quiet, professional, forgettable. Because the best predators don't announce themselves. They wait until the perfect moment to strike. I still thought about that day sometimes. The box, the security guard, Derek's smirk. But the memory didn't hurt anymore. It fueled me, reminded me why I was doing this, kept me focused when things got hard. I wasn't building a company for revenge. I was building it for power. The revenge would just be a bonus. About 2 years in, something funny happened. I was at a networking event when someone tapped my shoulder. It was Amanda from my old company. We'd worked together for almost a year before I got fired. She smiled brightly and started chatting like we were old friends. Megan! Oh my God, it's been forever! What are you doing now? I could tell she didn't actually remember the circumstances of my departure, or maybe she remembered and didn't care. Either way, she definitely didn't recognize that I now owned a successful consulting firm. I do business consulting, I said simply. Oh, that's great. Hey, we're actually hiring for our marketing department. Want me to send you the posting? She thought I needed a job. From her. I smiled politely and said, thanks, but I'm all set. She handed me her business card anyway and walked off to schmooze someone else. I looked at the card for a long moment, then slipped it into my pocket. The universe had a sense of humor, but it also had perfect timing, because what Amanda didn't know was that her company was about to need me a lot more than I needed them. 6 months later, a folder landed on my desk. My assistant had flagged it as potentially interesting. It was a prospective acquisition opportunity. A struggling company in our industry, same market segment, looking for a buyer or investor. I opened the file and saw the address. Same building where I used to work, same floor, same conference room where Derek had fired me in front of everyone. The company had changed names after a merger 3 years ago, but it was definitely them. I sat very still for a moment, staring at the papers. My heart was beating fast, but my hands were completely steady. This wasn't fate. It was just business. They'd made bad decisions for years, and now they were paying for it. Their revenue was down 40%. Employee turnover was at record highs. 2 major clients had left in the last quarter. They were drowning, and I had the capital to buy them. I could walk away right now, choose a different opportunity. Never think about them again. That would be the healthy thing to do, a mature thing. Instead, I opened my calendar and started making calls. Some opportunities are too perfect to ignore. The due diligence process took 3 months. My team reviewed every financial record, every contract, every employee file. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. The company was even more mismanaged than I'd realized. Derek had been promoted to vice president 2 years ago. Under his leadership, the department had lost 7 of its best people. Projects were consistently over budget and behind schedule. Client satisfaction scores had plummeted. But because Derek was good at managing up, the executives above him had no idea how bad things really were. He'd been covering his mistakes with creative accounting and shifting blame to subordinates. Classic Derek. The paper trail was damning. Emails where he took credit for other people's work, reports where he inflated his team's performance, budget documents that showed spending on unnecessary expenses while cutting training and development. He'd built his career on a foundation of lies and other people's labor. And now that foundation was crumbling. My lawyers drew up the acquisition papers. The price was fair, maybe even generous given how badly the company was doing. The current owners were just grateful someone wanted to buy them. They signed everything within a week. Just like that, I owned them. I didn't make any announcements. No press releases, no company-wide emails, just quiet paperwork signed in conference rooms far from the office. The current executives knew they'd been acquired, but they didn't know by whom. That information was buried in subsidiary corporate structures and LLC names. Legal but invisible. I wanted to see their faces when they found out. Wanted to watch the exact moment they realized what had happened. So I waited until everything was finalized. Until the contracts were signed and the money transferred, and there was absolutely no way to undo it. Then I sent the email. Mandatory all-hands meeting. Thursday at 9 a.m. Attendance required. I signed it with my full name and new title, Megan Walsh, Chief Executive Officer. I imagined the confusion spreading through the office, people checking the email headers, Googling my name, whispering to each other, "Is this the same Megan Walsh?" No, couldn't be. But the name, Megan Walsh, is a pretty common name. They wouldn't believe it until they saw me. Thursday morning couldn't come fast enough. I arrived 30 minutes early. The building looked exactly the same lobby, same security desk, same elevator with the broken panel button on floor 6, but I walked through it differently now. Different shoes, different posture, different everything. The security guard from 3 years ago was gone. New guy, younger, didn't recognize me. I signed in and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. My floor. The conference room was already set up. Same long tables, same uncomfortable chairs, same projector hanging from the ceiling. I stood at the head of the table and waited. Employees started filtering in around 8:55. I watched their faces as they entered. Confusion, curiosity, a few flickers of recognition that they quickly dismissed. It couldn't be me. The Megan Walsh they remembered was broken and powerless. This woman in the designer suit with the leather portfolio couldn't possibly be the same person they'd watched get escorted out by security. But it was. And at exactly 9 a.m., Derek walked in. Our eyes met. I watched the colour drain from his face. He remembered. Too late. "Good morning, everyone," I said calmly. "Let me introduce myself." The room was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Derek stood frozen in the doorway. Tracy from accounting had gone pale. Marcus looked like he might throw up. Amanda, who'd offered to send me a job posting 6 months ago, stared at me with her mouth actually hanging open. "My name is Megan Walsh," I continued, my voice steady and professional. "As of last Friday, I am the new CEO of this company. Some of you may remember me from my previous employment here." I paused, letting that sink in. For those who don't, I worked in this department 3 years ago before my position was eliminated. Eliminated. Such a polite way to describe what they'd done. I'm here today to discuss the future of this organisation and what changes will be implemented going forward. Derek finally moved, stumbling to an empty chair. His hands were shaking. The confident smirk was completely gone. This was the same man who'd stood in this exact room and humiliated me in front of everyone, who'd stolen my work and blocked my career, and then thrown me away like garbage. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat, didn't need to. My presence here was enough. I spent the next hour outlining my plans for the company, restructuring, new performance metrics, accountability measures, client service improvements. Everything I said was professional and reasonable. But everyone in that room understood the subtext. The old way of doing things was over. The people who'd succeeded by being loud and taking credit for others' work wouldn't survive in this new environment. I watched Derek squirm in his chair, watched Tracy stare at her notebook without writing anything, watched Marcus check his phone obsessively like he was already updating his resume. Some of the other employees, the ones who'd kept their heads down and actually worked, started sitting up straighter. I saw hope in their faces. Maybe things would finally be fair. Maybe their work would finally matter. After the meeting ended, Derek approached me. "Megan, we should talk. Privately." His voice was different now, smaller, no trace of the condescension he used to drip with. "My assistant will set up a meeting if you'd like to discuss your role here," I said politely. "But right now, I have other appointments." I walked past him without waiting for a response. Let him feel what it was like to be dismissed, to be treated like he didn't matter. Just for a moment. Just so he'd know. The following week, I brought in an independent audit team. They reviewed every department, every manager, every process. I didn't tell them who to target, just gave them clear criteria: efficiency, productivity, leadership effectiveness, ethical conduct. The results were damning. Derek's department was the worst performing in the entire company. Projects over budget by an average of 37%, timeline delays on 80% of deliverables, employee satisfaction scores in the bottom 10th percentile, and the ethics violations. Those were the really interesting part. Emails where Derek had explicitly told team members to work off the clock without reporting hours. Instances where he'd approved personal expenses on company cards. A pattern of taking credit for subordinates' work that went back almost 5 years. All documented, all verified, all fireable offences. I didn't have to do anything. The audit team presented their findings to the board. The board made the decisions. Derek was terminated along with 2 other executives who'd operated the same way. Not by me personally, by their own records, by the paper trail of their own choices. I never had to say a word about our personal history. Didn't need to. Their performance spoke for itself. Tracy came to my office 2 weeks later. She knocked hesitantly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. "Come in," I said. She sat down across from me, hands folded in her lap. She looked terrified. "I wanted to apologize," she started, for what I said. When you left, in the break room." I remembered. She won't last a month out there. I'd heard it clearly even though she'd thought I was out of earshot. "I was wrong," Tracy continued. "I was cruel and I was wrong and I'm sorry." I studied her for a moment. She looked genuinely remorseful, also genuinely scared for her job. "Do you remember why you said it?" I asked. She looked confused. "What you were feeling in that moment? Why you felt the need to kick someone who was already down?" Tracy's eyes filled with tears. I think I was scared. Scared it could happen to me, and it felt safer to make fun of you than to admit how powerless we all were. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty." "Am I fired?" she asked quietly. "That depends," I said. "Do you still think I won't last? Or are you ready to actually work?" I didn't fire Tracy or Marcus or most of the people who'd been there that day, the ones who'd laughed or looked away or made cruel comments they thought I'd never hear. Instead, I gave them a choice: adapt or leave, work with integrity or find somewhere else, contribute value or get out of the way. Some of them left on their own, couldn't handle the new expectations, couldn't function in an environment where they had to actually earn their positions. Others stayed and, surprisingly, thrived. Turned out some people were capable of growth when given clear standards and real leadership. The company started turning around within 6 months. Revenue stabilized, client satisfaction improved, employee retention went up for the first time in years. We won 2 major contracts that our competitors had been favored for. Word spread in the industry. Something's different over there. They're actually good now. I hired new people, talented people who'd been overlooked at other companies because they didn't play politics well. People like I used to be. Gave them opportunities and credit and room to grow. Built the kind of culture I'd wished for back when I was the one clutching a cardboard box. It worked. The company didn't just survive. It succeeded. And I made sure everyone knew exactly who was responsible for that turnaround. Derek never apologized, not once. He cleared out his office in silence, escorted by the same security guard who'd followed me 3 years earlier. I didn't go watch, didn't need to see it to know it happened. He sent one email after he left, subject line, recommendation request. He wanted me to be a reference for his job search. The audacity was almost impressive. I deleted it without responding. Tracy told me later that he'd been bad-mouthing me to former colleagues, saying I was vindictive, that I'd engineered his firing as revenge, that he'd done nothing wrong. Just so you know, Tracy said carefully, nobody believes him. I know, I replied, because the numbers didn't lie. The audit reports didn't lie. His own emails and decisions and patterns didn't lie. Derek could spin whatever story made him feel better, but reality was reality. Some of the other former executives tried to make amends, sent gifts or invitations to coffee or messages on LinkedIn. I ignored most of them, responded politely but distantly to others. I didn't need their apologies, didn't need closure or validation or acknowledgement. That part of my life was done. I'd already moved forward. They were just catching up. The company culture shifted dramatically over the next year. People started speaking up in meetings, sharing ideas, taking risks. Collaboration replaced competition. One of my new hires, a young woman named Priya, came to me 6 months in. "This is the first place I've worked where I'm not afraid," she said. "Afraid of what?" I asked. "Of being invisible, of doing good work and having someone else take credit, of mattering." I understood exactly what she meant. We implemented new policies, transparent promotion criteria, anonymous feedback systems, mandatory management training focused on ethical leadership, credit where credit was due. It wasn't complicated, just basic fairness and human decency. But in a corporate world where those things were rare, it made us stand out. Our reputation grew. We started getting recruitment inquiries from top talent at other firms. People wanted to work somewhere that actually valued work. The board noticed. Profits were up, client retention was up, employee satisfaction was up. Every meaningful metric had improved since the acquisition. They gave me full authority to run things however I wanted. I'd earned it. Not through politics or manipulation or stealing credit, through actual results, the way it was supposed to work. I didn't stay forever, never planned to. After 3 years, the company was stable and successful and operating exactly how I'd designed it. I'd proven everything I needed to prove, to them, to myself, to anyone who'd ever doubted me. I promoted Priya to CEO. She'd earned it through talent and dedication, and the exact kind of leadership the company needed. Then I moved on to the next challenge. Started a venture capital firm focused on investing in overlooked founders. People who had the skills but not the connections. The talent but not the privilege. The drive but not the opportunities. People like I used to be. I didn't need to stay at that company anymore. Didn't need to see Derek's empty office or walk past the break room where Tracy had mocked me or sit in the conference room where I'd been publicly humiliated. Those ghosts were gone. I'd exercise them not through revenge, but through building something better, through proving that their judgment meant nothing, through succeeding so completely that their opinions became irrelevant. The best victory isn't crushing your enemies. It's making them irrelevant, making them footnotes in a story that's ultimately about your own growth and success. They thought they were the main characters in my story. They were wrong. Sometimes I still think about that day. The cardboard box, the shaking hands, the security guard breathing coffee breath down my neck while Derek smirked and everyone pretended not to watch. But it doesn't hurt anymore. Now it's just information, data about who I was and who I became and what it took to bridge that gap. They mocked me when I was broke, laughed when I was powerless, dismissed me when I was vulnerable. And in doing so, they taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. That my worth was never dependent on their recognition. That power comes from competence, not performance. That the people who matter are the ones doing the work, not the ones taking credit for it. I built a successful company. Then another. Then a portfolio of investments in people who deserved chances they weren't getting. I learned my worth, and I never negotiated it again. Not with employers, not with clients, not with anyone. Derek is working middle management somewhere now. Tracy stayed at the company and actually became a decent employee. Marcus moved to another city. Amanda sends me LinkedIn requests every few months that I ignore. They're not villains in my story anymore, just people who made choices they have to live with. And me? I'm the person who turned their worst moment into my greatest strength. Sometimes the best revenge really is success, and never ever looking back.